time, it worked. And Alan lowered the grabs, which were then electronically locked onto the tractor.
Okay, Scott. We've got it.
Alright guys, right now I'm painting the extra engine parts that I made. Here you can see the one that's going to go on the intake side, which I've added a couple of greebles to, these styrene strips, just to put a little detail in it, which will get a little bit of extra painting to make the details stand out. And the one that's going on the engine side, which also has a bunch of extra little bits and pieces of styrene added to it. Let's see if we can get it to focus here, just to give it a little more detail, make it look a little more interesting. Now we just painted them with the Alclad airframe aluminum to match the rest of the engine. Now we're going to add a little bit of heat staining to it and a little bit of a burned effect to it, which is pretty cool with a new product that I just recently found at the Gundam Planet. Let me show you what it is. Alright, this is called Spray Consistence T041 Smoked Effect. Now this is something I just picked up from Gundam Planet. It is an airbrush only paint, and it gives you a really good burned smoky effect depending on how you use it. You can see it already on the engine itself, and now I'm going to paint the pieces here and give them a little bit of that smoky burned effect also, just to add a little color to them and make them look a little more aged. Okay guys, and here we have the finished paint job. You can see how when you go a little heavy on the edges, let's see if we can give you a better look at it. Focus, camera is not focusing. Hold on, let's go right back here where it was focused. It gives you that singed and burned look of the metal on the edges, while still letting the metallic sheen show through, which really discolors the metal and really gives it a nice burned look. I really like this stuff. The only place I've ever found it is at Gundam Planet, and I don't know where you can get it anywhere else, but the stuff really gives a really nice burned look.
At least that's what I've seen on the show. Even though it does have these openings here
To the parts you're painting.
I'm not really sure which is which again.
Okay guys, and here is the finished product. If you remember from the previous videos, there was a big gap between the front part of the engine and the rear, and now we have our new engine part installed, which covers that gap and gives a physical connection to both the front and the rear portion of the engine. And then there was a bit of a gap in the front here where the engine piece ended. So now we have what looks like a complete engine running from front to back on the nacelle, from the air intake at the front of the ship all the way to the exhaust in the back of the ship. I think that worked out pretty well. I'm happy with that. Alright, let's continue on with this build. Okay, so here we go. The entire engine is in the ship. I really like the way it came out. Everything's glued in, and hopefully will stay there. But I really do like the way the whole thing came out. Once it's all covered up, it should look like a one large continuous part, as opposed to the 4 parts that it is. 2 kit parts and 2 parts that I fabricated myself. So let's close up the body. Okay guys, now we have the body completely assembled and glued together. Now let me give you guys, who are going to go out and look for this kit and build it, just a little bit of a tip. When you're gluing the body together, if it's painted, not so much of an issue. Or if it doesn't have a huge mass of wires on the inside, not so much of an issue. But if you are going to light it, when you start gluing the upper and lower halves of the body together, I started with gluing this corner together just to hold the ship together. Then I had to make sure that none of the wires were sticking out on each side of the nacelle, inner and outer, before I went and then proceeded to glue down this corner. And once you have that side done, then you just repeat the process on this side, where you'll glue down this corner and then this corner here. Now, overall, the fit is excellent of the two body halves, but the locating pins are almost non-existent, so it's a little tough, and you got to be very careful to make sure you have them perfectly aligned, because if not, it can throw off the entire thing. Now, the only downside I see is that there is a little bit of a fit issue with this rear panel here, not allowing the nose cone to sit fully into the body, resulting a bit of a gap here. Now, if I was going to glue this nose cone in, yeah, you can push it in, glue it down, and that will, once the glue sets, that'll take care of your gap. Now, I'm not going to do that because I want to keep my nose cone removable so you can display it with all of the interior exposed. As you notice, the gap here is not as pronounced as it is on the other side, but I'm okay with that. I can live with that, you know, like I said, because I want to be able to remove the nose cone. Now, another thing is, the nose cone does bring a windshield. Now, I haven't tried the windshield yet. I kind of like the fact that I can just look in there and I can see crystal clearly the entire cockpit. So I don't really know if I even want to put the windshield in, because the windshield, knowing the thickness of the plastic, will probably distort the view going into the cockpit. So that's something I got to think about. But as you can see, the engine's in. It really does look good in there. There's your nuclear reactor in the back. This really looks good when it's all together. So there she is. The body is almost complete. The next thing to do is to work on this set of engines here and get the rear exhaust outlets painted and installed on the ship. Okay, guys, we're working on the engines now, as they are the last major component and subassembly of the Thunderbird 2 that we have to complete to have the ship finished. Now, we just finished painting all of the trim work and the engine colors onto the main body of the two, well, not the engines, these are the thrusters, I think, but they hang off the back of the ship. So we just painted them all up, did the black and yellow trimming on it. So let's unwrap these things and see how well we did. And here we go, guys. And now we have all of our trim painted. And these engines are ready to be mounted onto the ship. Now, the reason I did this was because the kit brings decals for the engine housings, which would wrap around the entire housing and give you the exact same look that we have here, or a similar look. But I thought the colors were a little too bright, much like I thought the colors were very bright on the ship overall, so I muted them down a little bit. So I'm much happier with this coloring on the engine. Now they're going to need a little bit of weathering to darken them up a little bit and dirty them down a little bit, and we'll be all set. The next components that we painted were the insides of the thrusters. Now what I'm going to do here is start drilling out all of the holes for the exhaust vents here to give it a little bit more of a realistic appearance. Then our last two parts are these two end caps for the engines that sit between the rear stabilizer fins. So we're going to have to apply the decals to those and dirty them up a little bit, and then apply them right to the ship. Alright guys, when we're done with the ship itself, then it's going to be time to work on a diorama. Now, I went to visit my brother this weekend, and I was telling him about how I wanted to put sounds into this, right along with the lights and everything, just make it a full multimedia diorama. And he just happened to have these small devices. This is a Bluetooth chip with audio outputs that we can connect two speakers to and stream music and sound from my phone to this device, which will then play when I install speakers underneath the display base. This should be a pretty cool effect, as I can play the ship sounds and I can also play the theme music from the show, all sorts of stuff. So this is going to be a cool addition to this build once we start working on the display base. Okay guys, now we're going to start with making our weathered and smoky effects on the engine. So this is one that I've already done, and I'm going to walk you through the entire process. Now here it is compared to one that's not done, and we're going to go step by step toward doing this one. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my T041, load up my airbrush, and then when I spray it, I'm going to spray it right on the edge of the part, just to coat the bottom layer of it and let the overspray travel up on the body of the engine. That's going to give us our singed look on the bottom of the engine, and then the rest of the smoky effect is going to travel slightly up the body of the engine and just fade as it gets higher up. Then we're going to repeat the same process and do it on the front of the engine, and that's going to give us a smoky effect and a weathered effect on the front of the engine, as when it's flying, it's carrying all the dirt and soot. Now we're going to do the outlet of the engines, and we're going to do the exact same thing on there. We're going to just darken the edges and let the overspray fill in the rest of what is being painted. And that's really going to give us a really good singed look on our part. This paint is fantastic. I'm really loving it, and I hope I can find it again, as the only place I've been able to find it is Gundam Planet. So now we're just going to continue and do our weathering. We're going to do some streaking, much like I described earlier in this video series, and really give these engines a good worn, used look. And here are the finished engines installed on the Thunderbird 2. Hitting it with a little light so that you guys can see it clearly. Let me just make a little room here. And there they go with their weathering and their streaking. You can see how the burned effect really worked out well on the exhaust. Now you have to remember that was all transparent plastic when I started, just like the rest of the ship. But I do think that the smoking and the weathering really fit in with the rest of the ship, and with the wear and weathering on the rest of the ship. Really happy with the way those turned out. Let's take a look at them without the light on. Yep, I'm really happy with the way that turned out. The effect is a little more I want to say it stands out a little bit more when you see it in person than it does here on the camera. But I'm really happy with the way that turned out. I always thought these engines were a little silly looking, the way they stick out of the back of the plane this way, but I think that with all the weathering, they just kind of work with the model the way it is right now. Alright guys, now that we've finished one part of the engines on the Thunderbird 2, now we're working on the second part, which are the overhead engines that ride right here between the two tail fins. Now, one thing you want to make note of is when you're putting this together, you're going to have to make sure that the two ends really seal up close to each other, because it's going to be a very tight fit to get this into these slots here on the wing. So I super glued them together, put my clamps on just to hold them together. Now we're going to take the clamps off and see how well that worked out. Now that's perfect right there. Really can't get much better than that. And let's see. As you can see, they're totally glued together, basically making one part now. Now we'll do the other side, which will be a little more visible. And there we go. They're completely glued together. Now we're going to have to see if we can make them fit in the wing. Now, from a couple of test fits I've done already, without gluing them, I know it's going to be a really tight fit. So there may be some trimming and sanding involved to make them slide into the wings without putting too much effort in. As you can see, there's not a lot of meat there. So what you don't want to do is crack a wing or break one of these mounting points while you're putting it together. So you're really going to have to do a bit of test fitting, trial and error thing, and pretty sure I'm going to have to sand and file some of it down. Guys, now I did try and test fit this, and the unpainted side goes in very smoothly, no issues at all. The painted side, it's a little too tight. So what we're going to do is we're going to sand this down a little bit, take some of the paint off because the paint might be taking up the space we need. That one layer of paint might be making it just a little too tight for it to slide in smoothly. I do believe that's the best we're going to get out of that. Because we're right up. All right, guys. So now we have the upper engines installed. It's starting to really come together now. Now we just have to get the end caps, the decals installed, and the end caps placed on. And the Thunderbird 2 will be finished, and then we move on to the next phase of this build. Okay, guys, I think we're going to bring this video to a close here. We have all of the engines installed and done. I'll give you a little light there so you can get a good look at them. We have the end caps have been decaled. Just waiting for the decals to dry so that we can give it a good flat coat and then install them permanently on the ship. But as of right now, it looks like she is good and ready to go. So we're going to end the video here, and in the next part of the video we're going to start on the next phase of this build, which is building the diorama base, which should be really interesting because, as I said previously, I'm going to be adding Bluetooth sound effects. We have to run the wires into the base, add switches, and then don't even know how I'm going to paint up the base or what kind of scenario we're going to have here. But no doubt it's going to be fun to try. So I'm going to let you go here, guys. Give you one last look at Thunderbird 2 with her cutaway sections all finished up. And I'll see you on the next one. It's going to be a lot of fun, so don't miss it. And guys, come on, subscribe. It's free. And you'll get notified every time I put a new episode up. So there's lots of stuff coming. See you later. Well, see you on the next one. Anyway, I said that already. Okay, bye.